It's time for the Splash Live from Civic Center TV, featuring stories from and about people like you in the greater West Bloomfield area. Simulcast on cable, 89.3 Lakes FM, social media, and the web. Now live from Green Media Center on Walnut Lake Road, it's the Splash Live.
Live, local, social, it's the Splash Live on Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM. I'm your host, Tyler Keefe, thanking you for joining us and for always following along on CivicCenterTV.com and across our social media. We begin today with some major news out of West Bloomfield Township. This just into our team at Civic Center TV. A huge change is on its way in our chief leadership at Town Hall. West Bloomfield Township Supervisor Steve Kaplan announcing he will be exiting his position effective in the coming weeks. He'll be leaving for a new job in the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, a place he's very familiar with from in the past in his career. With more details, we now go live to the boardroom at West Bloomfield Town Hall. Our very own Jake Schaff has more. Jake.
Hey, Tyler, good morning. I am live in the West Bloomfield Township boardroom where Steve has spent a good portion of his career. He was elected as a member of the Board of Trustees all the way back in 2000 and has been serving as an elected full-time supervisor ever since 2016. He previously worked in the Macomb County Prosecutor's Office beginning in 1986, then serving as an assistant prosecutor in Macomb and later in Wayne County, where he will now be returning to the prosecutor's office to work on prosecutor Kim Worthy's team as an assistant prosecuting attorney. So Steve will be returning to the courtroom, which will be very, very exciting for him. But of course, his presence will be sorely missed around West Bloomfield Township. I recently had the chance to speak with some of the department heads who have been working very closely with Steve for many years, some since the very beginning, to get their thoughts on what Steve has brought to the community and how they're feeling now that he's moving on to a new position.
Steve Kaplan is just one of the greatest leaders I've ever known. The township has been very fortunate to be led by him under his command. He's very hands-on, very caring and gracious. He is just outstanding as far as leadership goes, and all of the staff just really love him. They love his humor that he brings to the workplace, and he's going to be missed dearly.
Steve is, I've worked with him as long as I've been here, before when he was a trustee and then after when he became the supervisor. He's always been very easy to work with and is always interested in progress at the township. And he's been very empowering to all of the department heads to kind of set the direction in their particular area of expertise.
I think Steve Kaplan since 2015 that I've known him, has worked really hard to make West Bloomfield a better community or maintain the great community that we have by encouraging new developments and looking at ways to improve our processes and procedures and support, our department heads like myself.
What would you say Steve has brought to the people of West Bloomfield?
Well, I think he's brought consistency to the policy, consistency in running a township, consistency in dealing with people, which is very important, especially in our business, HR and labor relations, to be consistent. And Steve has worked with me on that. We've done very well together.
What do you wish for Steve as he heads off into this new opportunity with Wayne County?
Well, I just wish him a long, many years of health and happiness there. I know that prosecuting and his attorney days have always been some of his greatest. And I know that he's really looking forward to returning to that line of work. So I'm happy for him and sorry for us.
It'll definitely be different around here. There'll be a lot less jokes that we will be having probably in Town Hall, and it'll definitely be different. But hopefully he's still going to live here, and hopefully he still is interested in what happens in the community.
Nothing but kind words for Steve Kaplan after serving so many years for this great township, and I'm very excited to see what he's going to be doing in Wayne County. But Tyler, with his departure, that does mean some changes are going to be coming to the township. Steve will be exiting his position as township supervisor sometime in early December, with his final township meeting date set for December 2nd. This will be a complete exit from the Board of Trustees, and at that point, the board will have 45 days to appoint a new township supervisor. So some big changes coming to the community, but we wish Steve all the best as he moves on to this next opportunity. Back to you, Tyler.
Jake Schaff with us live in the boardroom at West Bloomfield Town Hall. Appreciate that report, Jake. Once again, breaking news into Civic Center TV as we begin the day today and begin with you on the Splash Live. Steve Kaplan, who's been serving as the West Bloomfield Township Supervisor for the last 8 years, will be exiting that position, just recently reelected as supervisor, but a great opportunity has come forth for him to return to his roots as an attorney, go back to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, and do what he loves best, to litigate, to help people and to help our community. Of course, spent many years in the Macomb County Prosecutor's Office, a few in the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office before taking over as a township supervisor in 2016, and now going back to that position to serve under Kim Worthy's office in the Prosecutor's Office, and one of the largest counties in our local area. We think about the Tri-County between Macomb, Wayne, and Oakland. He's going to provide a great support there, but still be an excellent supporting member of our community here in Greater West Bloomfield. Somebody that has been working alongside Steve Kaplan for a number of years as a member of some of the auxiliary boards in West Bloomfield, and most recently from his position of leadership as chairperson with the West Bloomfield Parks and Recreation Commission, is Robert Brooks. He joins us now on the Splash Live for more reaction to this massive news in West Bloomfield today. Robert, thank you for being with us.
Tyler, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Glad to have you on what is a momentous occasion here. It's a big paradigm shift at West Bloomfield Town Hall. For almost, at this point, 25 years, Steve Kaplan's been serving as a trustee and on the board, and now most recently in the last 8 years as a supervisor. What was your initial reaction as the department heads and the chairpeople of the commissions got word, as you did around the same time we did, that Steve Kaplan would be exiting his office as supervisor?
Quite honestly, I have to say that I've known Steve now for about 15 years, and I wasn't so surprised, honestly, because I know him well. He really enjoys what he was doing in the prosecutor's office in the past. I think after 8 years of service to our township, I believe that his heart was still in trying out and being back in the role of working in the prosecutor's office. He has a personality that opens up to people. He likes to be funny of sorts at times. Some people don't know how to take that. But I really believe from our friendship that Steve loves helping people. And I think in a prosecutor's office, you have to take the stance of understanding people. And I think Steve does a good job at doing that.
And how does that then, Robert, reflect his ability to lead the township as he has over the last 8 years as township supervisor, beginning in 2016, taking over at a time that was frankly a bit of tumult on that board, and bringing them back to a point where it's really cohesive as we stand in 2024?
So he had a tall task ahead of him when he took over as a township supervisor. He always seems to go after everything he does with his utmost care. He cares about people. Now, some would say he sometimes bends too far one way or the other, but I always think that he's always looking to make people see the best in each other and to get along. And that's tough to do sometimes when you have adversity. And so Steve, over these, from 2016 to 2024, those 8 years, really did an awesome job in trying to get people to understand one another. He wasn't, I'll say, overly liked by everybody, which I don't think any of us are, but he made his stand on our township. He would do anything for a resident that called to try to make that resident understand that the township, and in his role, was working for them. And so he just always opened his heart to people. And I think in any role that he takes on in his lifetime, he's going to continue to do that. I still want to call and will call Steve my friend. And he's been a great colleague in the township over many years. As he was the liaison to our West Bloomfield Parks Commission, he brought information in. He shared it, and he always gave us the leading soundboard of what's going on in the township. If, for instance, some of our commissioners on the Parks Board were not aware of some of the things going on specifically in the township, he would let us know the highlights, the headlines, and he would keep us abreast. We're going to truly miss Steve Kaplan.
Robert Brooks is with us. He is the chairperson of the West Bloomfield Parks and Recreation Commission. On the Splash Live, we have breaking news, of course, today beginning our program as Steve Kaplan, Township Supervisor in West Bloomfield, has announced he will be exiting his office in early December. His final meeting will be December 2nd. That is a full meeting of the West Bloomfield Township Board of Trustees, where that process will begin of replacing him as supervisor, as Jake Schaff from our team mentioned on the program. That's going to be a 45-day opening for the board to appoint a new supervisor and then move on from there. And later on, that supervisor position, that term would then last until the midterm elections in 2026, where the public would then vote a new supervisor into office full-time. With us again, Robert Brooks from the West Bloomfield Parks and Recreation Commission. Now, you've served as the chairperson of that commission for many years at this point, Robert. You've also been a chairperson of other boards and commissions and participated through the years. And so, as you reflect on Steve's leadership and his interpersonal interactions, what maybe have you picked up or tried to emulate in your leadership over these years after working with Steve and others?
So our township tries to give the diversity of our community all a seat at the table. And I think Steve has always tried to do that in all that he's done. And so, at least that's what I've picked up. And so I try to do the same thing. We're strategic of sorts on our boards and commissions. I initially joined the Woodlands Commission. I was appointed in 2010, I believe. And I served on that commission. It then got put together with the Wetlands Commission and became the Environmental Commission. I thought that I would get a break of sorts. And oddly enough, I wound up also serving on the Environmental Commission when it got put together and served there. I think it was for 8 to 10 years, recently coming off of that about 4 years ago. But since I've served as chair, and the chair is kind of a rotating seat of sorts, because every year in the Recreation Parks Commission, we get together and we move that around. We have people who have skills, varied levels on our Parks and Rec Commission, and we try to make sure that leadership is shown through whoever wants to take the position on. So I'm honored and humbled to be selected as the chair of the Parks Commission. I don't take it lightly. I have done my best to mentor the leadership and all the staff. I have tried to install processes as an encourager of those processes that keeps our parks to be the very best in Michigan and keeps our recreation programs fresh, up to date. So with that said, I think Steve does the same thing with the township. The township has a number of different departments, and Steve has made those departments much better over his 8-year time. I think if we look across the departments that he's had an interaction with, he encourages, supports, and gets out of the way. And I think that's something that I try to emulate as well, that I've watched him do, is the getting out of the way part and let people be successful as teams. And I got to tell you, in West Bloomfield, we have the best staff members across the township, as well as the different commissions. And if we let them truly show their capabilities, we can and will continue to be the very best in Michigan.
and we look at the staff at West Bloomfield Parks and Recreation and all the work that they've done over the years, and with Kelly and Megan and Lauren and so many others, too many to name on just a 1-hour program like the Splash Live. That's a great reflection of that, as is Building and Development Services, Environmental, Planning and Zoning. We heard from so many of those leaders also as they reflected on Steve Kaplan's career at West Bloomfield Township. And we have great leaders that are going to be remaining in place on that township board. Our other electeds, Debbie Binder in the clerk's office, Terry Weingarten in the treasurer's office. But there is still a bit of a changing of the guard that's happening now. Howard Rosenberg exiting the board after 16 years serving there, now replaced by the public with Vincent Kirkwood, who you're very familiar with on that board, and Dale Young will take over just after the beginning of the year as the new chief of police. So there is a bit of a changing of the guard, but a lot of that leadership still staying in place. So as you think about this moment in our township in West Bloomfield, Robert, what are your hopes for the immediate future as we see new leaders emerge at some of the top levels and merge that leadership with the sustained leaders that we have continuing forward?
What I think special about West Bloomfield is that these leaders have come up through, I'll call it the ranks. And the ranks, as I see them, is shadowing in great leaders. And so you mentioned Vincent Kirkwood. Vincent, I believe, is going to be an outstanding trustee. He was elected and did very well. He is going to be bringing the voice of all of the culture and the people based on his past work with DEI across the township. But most importantly, he was a good leader and chair at one time, I believe, of our Parks Commission. And I think that leadership will continue. When I look at folks like Dale Young coming up under Chief Patton, I have to just echo the same kinds of thoughts and applaud, because I think that when we have had people serve under great leaders, they themselves also can emulate that leadership and become the very best that they are. And so I think we as a community have not only rallied around what we can do together and be inclusive of all people, but we rally around people themselves and encourage people to be leaders so that our residents get the very best out of government and its means of helping them in the area of parks to enjoy life outside of their homes, in the area of recreation, to come together as people, learn about one another, and do activities together. So, and when I think about the township, there's so many services that go on there that, it's just something to behold, quite honestly.
Robert Brooks is with us, the chairperson of the West Bloomfield Parks and Recreation Commission. As we reflect on breaking news today, Steve Kaplan, our township supervisor in West Bloomfield, announcing that he will be exiting his office in early December to take a position as an assistant prosecutor in Kim Worthy's office in Wayne County. Robert, before we let you go, I've got one more minute with you here. I want to give you a chance to say your final words, your final reflections on this news that we've received today of Steve's exit from the supervisor's office.
Well, my final words would be more aligned to Steve as a family person. I've known Steve's wife longer than I've known Steve. When I got active, when my children were in the schools, with one of the kids programs where parents were helping kids, pretty much teaching them about things they should stay away from. And quite frankly, then when I met Steve, I realized that he was not just a family man. He was someone who really cared about those that he interfaced with. So I think that as a great leader in our community, he moving into Wayne County will bring great things there in the prosecutor's office. I look forward to his leadership there as well. But I got to tell you, Steve is still going to be active in our community. He loves our community. He has a love for his family. And I just salute the fact that I think he's going back to something that he really loves, He has had over 42 years as a licensed attorney. And my talks with him in confidentiality from time to time, he's just overly impressed me with his knowledge of the law. So I think that he'll do really well in an area that he really, truly loves on the career side.
I don't care what anyone else says. My only major requirement, outside of all the basics for the next township supervisor, they got to be able to name all the presidents, if not the presidents and the vice presidents, much like Steve. Robert Brooks with us on the Splash Live. Thank you so much for your time today, especially in this moment in our township's history.
Thanks for having me, Tyler. I appreciate it.
Glad to have you on. Robert Brooks from the West Bloomfield Parks and Recreation Commission, one of our chief leaders of our boards and commissions and other community groups here in West Bloomfield, reflecting as another great leader in our community plans to exit his position in the coming weeks. One more time into our studio this morning, we got news that Steve Kaplan, West Bloomfield Township Supervisor, has announced he will be exiting the supervisor's office in early December. His final meeting as supervisor will be December 2nd. That's a Monday night. We will have that broadcast for you right here on Civic Center TV and on 89.3 Lakes FM, and plenty more reflection from other township leaders, including Steve Kaplan, in the coming days right here on the Splash Live. So stay tuned with us and find even more updates as you follow along with us on CivicCenterTV.com. Of course, on our YouTube page at Civic Center TV and on Facebook at Civic Center TV 15 as well. From West Bloomfield Township on to the Tri-Cities, where a change in leadership has also undergone, with same leadership coming back in. But a little bit of extra time went into the election process that ultimately decided who would be that fifth and final member of the city council in the prettiest little city in Michigan. Jim Cowper, the current mayor of Sylvan Lake, re-elected by just 11 votes after a write-in campaign that came down to himself and Luke Kasser in Sylvan Lake, recently decided after the Board of Canvassers in Oakland County certified the election. Joining us for reflection on this really interesting process that led to his re-election is the man himself, the mayor of the city of Sylvan Lake, Jim Cowper, with us on the Splash Live. Mayor, thank you for being with us.
Hey, thank you for having me, Tyler.
Happy to have you on. Congratulations on your re-election to the Sylvan Lake City Council. Had to wait a little bit for this, but I'm sure you're happy to have had it be worth the wait as you're now re-elected to the City Council.
Yeah, I'm excited. A little bit of wait, but that's okay. Let the process do what the process does, and I'm ready to come back and work for the residents of the city of Sylvan Lake for 4 more years.
So this was a pretty interesting election in the city of Sylvan Lake. You had 2 open spots, you had 3 candidates that were running, but when voters went to the polls at the Sylvan Lake Community Center, they only saw one name on the ballot because of some technicalities that ultimately led to you and your opponent, Luke Kasser, being write-in votes. And so take us through a little bit of how the election process went for you as a candidate and how you navigated these pretty unique circumstances.
Sure. So I went through the normal process, went and pulled a petition, got my signatures, took the signatures into our city clerk. And then there's a simple form you have to fill out. So the clerk's responsibility is to validate those signatures and make sure those signatures are correct and legitimate Sylvan Lake voters. My responsibility as the candidate is to fill the form out. And there's one line in the middle of the form. I missed it. It simply asks, how do you want your name to appear on the ballot? And I missed it, left the form blank. So when it was sent to Oakland County said the form is invalid and I'm either not a candidate or I have to choose to be a write-in candidate. So of course I immediately chose to be a write-in candidate. My intent all along was to run for city council and seek re-election. So, technicality, it's a form. It's my responsibility to fill that form out correctly. I failed to. So the beauty of our country and the beauty of our government, you have another avenue. The other avenue is a write-in candidacy, and that's what we pursue.
And it's a great learning experience too for you as a candidate, for the city as a whole, to kind of see the election process still be able to play out, where a simple mistake that can happen to anybody in any circumstance, whether it's an election or they're filling out a form at City Hall, whatever the case may be, ultimately there are processes to counteract that and make sure that the end result still is at the will of the people or the will of the person in our community. So as you went through the election process as a write-in candidate and you waited on election day. What was that like for you as a candidate who, previously when you've been elected, you've known the results pretty expediently, but in this case had to wait a couple of weeks for those final results to come in?
Yeah, I mean, for me, that really wasn't a problem. I felt comfortable all along that the residents were largely supportive. Yes, it was a very close race. Luke Cassar did a great job. Hats off to Luke. And so it wasn't really too unnerving for me. I think it was probably a little more unnerving for other people in the city, more so than me. We went through the normal process, just like when I ran 4 years ago. Yard signs, postcards mailed to homes, grassroots. Walk the streets. Yard signs, all of those things, email databases, variety of things that you would do in any election. So I kind of approached it the same way and went about it the same way. So yes, I guess it was probably a little more unnerving for others, maybe a little more so than me. I was confident all along, and I'm glad the results are the voters decided to choose me to reelect.
Mayor Jim Cowper is with us from the city of Sylvan Lake, recently re-elected to the Sylvan Lake City Council. Had to wait a little bit of extra time as the write-in votes were counted and officially cast and counted by the Oakland County Board of Canvassers to eventually come to this result where it was a very close race between himself and Luke Cassar in Sylvan Lake, and both ran a very, very nice campaign in the prettiest little city in Michigan. But now, Mayor, you get to get back to business in Sylvan Lake after the election, and like always, the 5 members of the City Council and the auxiliary board members, the city staff, get to look forward to the future. Right now, what are you looking forward to most about continuing to build the city and put the will of the people into action in your next term?
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. So the first thing is of course, balanced budgets and make sure that we're fiscally sound, which we are. The largest part of our budget is the police force, and making sure that we have all the resources to keep our city safe and make sure that our chief and the officers have the resources they need to do their job on a daily basis. Interacting with city council and with our city manager to make sure that we're aware of anything that we may have to address. Thankfully, we don't have anything real pressing in front of us. We'll continue to do our roads. We did some roads this year. We'll continue to do that. Previous council had created some funding to be able to do that, and so we'll continue that. The other things are always trying to make the city the prettiest little city. So what are we doing, whether it's flowers or grass or trees and any of those type of enhancements? We've had some great strides in the last 4 years in the utilization of our community center that our residents have flocked to and have chosen a variety of different ways to use our community center, and that's been wonderfully successful. We've had food trucks and music programs and a variety of other things where residents can get involved and volunteer their time to ask the city to help them put on an event that they may have a certain interest in. That's really brought the community together, and those events are widely attended. We're a small city, 900, 800 homes, 1,800 people. We have 200-300 people at a lot of these events. That's wonderful. So that's all good stuff, and we continue to do that. The biggest thing is always being fiscally responsible, and we've gotten better and better in city council meetings and study sessions where residents come to the meetings and speak their mind and ask questions, and that's great, and we welcome that, and we welcome more of that. And again, we've had conversations in the past about how Civic Center TV is a great partner that we televise our meetings so residents can watch them without actually going to City Hall or City Council or the community center if they choose not to. And that's a great scenario. I know some of our neighboring cities don't televise, and our residents really, really like the fact that we do.
We have a very vibrant city, an active city that takes action and cares about the issues that affect their neighbors and the great things that bring the entire community together. Mayor, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate having you on, Mayor Jim Cowper from the city of Sylvan Lake. Keep up to date on everything happening in the prettiest little city in Michigan by visiting their website on sylvanlake.org. Or, of course, you can always stay up to date on everything happening in Sylvan Lake and beyond in Greater West Bloomfield with us on Civic Center TV. From the prettiest little city in Michigan to the rest of our elections in Oakland County, that process of counting those election votes in Sylvan Lake with the write-ins also reflects the processes that happen everywhere else after the election is done. That night, we get those unofficial results, as you would see on the Oakland County website, that give us almost the entirety of the picture. But what's the process like after those votes are counted that night in order to turn those from unofficial to official? Here with more insight is the Oakland County Clerk and Register of Deeds, Lisa Brown. Thank you for being with us, Lisa.
Thanks for having me, Tyler.
Always glad to have you on to talk about election information, especially when it comes to the process. It's really important that the community understands what goes on behind the scenes in their local municipalities, but also at the county level to make sure that their voices are heard and that every vote is counted correctly. And so I want to start off with the situation we had in the city of Sylvan Lake. That city council meeting, typically pretty straightforward. They have 3 candidates. They're going to have 2 positions that were open in this particular election. But they had a situation where there were some clerical differences that led to a couple of write-in candidates having a very close matchup in the end, separated by under 15 votes. Give us some insight on how that process went and ultimately why there was a bit of a delay after election night on determining whether Mayor Jim Cowper would be reelected or former City Council member Luke Kasser would be reelected to that board.
Well, with write-in candidates, so first of all, our equipment will pick up at the end of each race. There is at least 1 line, depending upon how many positions are available that are open, a line that's blank, that a space to put in a write-in candidate. And so that box needs to be filled in next to that blank and then a name put in. It takes time. We had write-in candidates all over the county. We had over 30,000 write-ins. Not all of them were valid, but we have to determine that. And when I say we, I kind of a royal week. The Board of Commissioners, the Board of Canvassers, which is made up of 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans, go through. And I'm going to tell you, if you wrote yourself in, unless you were a certified candidate, you didn't actually get a vote. But people write in Mickey Mouse. Jared Goff was very popular this November. He got write-ins for all kinds of positions. But it takes time to go through all of those and sort those out from non-certified candidates to the certified write-in candidates. And then determining, if it's a misspelling, can the canvassers tell it was their intent to vote for this person or not? And all that takes time. And we, at the end of the canvass, when we're done with the canvass and can certify everything, that's when those names, those certified candidate names, show up on our website with how many votes they received.
Jared Goff, certified civilian quarterback, according to some national pundits. Not a certified write-in candidate, but the enthusiasm certainly there on election night for some of those evidently undecided voters. So ultimately what you're saying is when these write-in candidates that are certified and are approved by the county and through the election processes locally to get on the ballot and be valid candidates, it takes that little extra intricacy to essentially hand pick those votes and determine vote by vote, ballot by ballot who is decided in the case of something like Sylvan Lake.
Yeah, it's looking at each ballot that has that write-in. Is it a certified candidate in that race? Can we determine, again, the royal we, can it be determined who they were intending to write in if it's not a perfect spelling of a certified write-in candidate, and then allocating the votes thus after that.
And the best part about it is that it's a bipartisan process. As you said, Board of Canvassers, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. They got to be able to come to that consensus on each and every one of those votes with those write-ins. So even more assurances there in the prettiest little city in the state of Michigan, with Jim Cowper being reelected to their city council. That officially announced earlier on this week. Lisa Brown is with us, the Clerk and Register of Deeds for Oakland County, on today's edition of the Splash Live. The process for those qualified write-in candidates very much mirrors what we have on the rest of the post-election process at the county level. On election night, those results we get are often labeled unofficial results. So why is that the case?
It's always going to say unofficial on election night, and it's going to remain unofficial until we finish the canvass. Listen, we now have 6 days for our military and overseas voters ballots to be received 6 days after Election Day, as long as it's postmarked by Election Day. So it's going to take us at least a week to certify any election. And then if you have an absentee ballot, you get a notice from your local clerk that you need to cure your signature. Your signature was missing from your absentee ballot, or it didn't match what's on file. You're going to hear you hear that you need to cure your signature. And so those, they get 3 days after election. So those come in after Election Day as well. So we add more votes as those ballots come in on that. Actually, it ends up being on the 7th day. So what you see on election night, it's almost everything, but it's not everything. And sometimes, there are long hours. There's mistakes that get made. Sometimes some ballots end up not being counted in the absentee voting counting board, or, so during the canvass, we're making sure that things balance and everything was counted. But sometimes our local clerks have to bring in their results or their ballots rather, from a precinct and have those retabulated. And so they're unofficial until we've gone through the entire canvass process, and then we sign off and certify, and then the results are official.
And there's what people may not understand when they see those results on election night, or they're wondering why there's a bit of a delay. All those processes that go through, both on a local level and then next on the county level, and then from there on to the state and federal level. It's all a step-by-step process, and good for us to get a better understanding of that as we are weeks removed from the election. But of course, those races all going to affect us for years to come. Lisa Brown is with us, the Oakland County Clerk and Register of Deeds, on today's edition of the Splash Live. I want to go back into this election season because you made an interesting point about absentee ballot voting, whether it's veterans and active military that are overseas and are submitting their votes within a certain time period, or
not veterans. Veterans, but military and overseas voters.
Yeah, I misspoke on that. Military overseas. Veterans can do their absentee ballots locally and in this area as well as anybody can. With that availability for no reason absentee voting and for early voting also, your office has taken extra steps to provide some help to local municipalities to ease that process a little bit, considering there's such a time period and an openness for people to make sure they get their voices heard. What's the response been like, especially in Greater West Bloomfield, from our local municipalities, and how helpful that's been in helping their local citizens get out the vote?
Yeah, I often say democracy is a team sport, and when early voting became the law in Michigan, and the option for the counties to contract with locals to run it for the locals, before it even passed, I said I would do that. And our local clerks already have so much on their plate, and what bothers me is you don't hear the hero-like stories of our local clerks and the steps they take to ensure that everybody gets access to the ballot that should. We had one of our local clerks from the Greater West Bloomfield area go to the Oakland County Jail because they couldn't get their absentee ballot because they were in jail, and they brought them a ballot at the jail. We had clerks who go to the hospital, who went to hospitals to deliver ballots to ensure that everybody has access to the ballot. People don't hear these stories. But our local clerks have a lot on their plates, and it just keeps adding up, and they've been wonderful ballot proposals, but it does cause a lot more work for every clerk, every election administrator, every level. And I think that our early voting has been working really well. It was an incredible turnout for November. Almost 20% of the turnout was by early voters, at our early voting location. So it was a learning process for us too, that, okay, people really are going to take advantage of this, at least in a November election. They weren't that heavily used in any of the other elections before this. But we're going to tweak our processes and everything like that, so it runs even smoother next go around. But it was great to see people utilize this new way to vote here in Michigan.
And understanding that there's so much that goes into that makes it easier to understand why this partnership with Oakland County and our local municipalities has such a wide-ranging impact, especially when we're expecting a more fuller turnout like we do for presidential elections every 4 years. Lisa Brown, the Oakland County Clerk and Register of Deeds, is with us on the Splash Live. Before we let you go, anything else that we should know about lessons learned from this election or things that voters should be aware of in the upcoming elections going forward?
I'm not sure that everyone still understands early voting or that they can't. So early voting is just like voting on election day. We now basically have 10 election days, except instead of it being at the precinct level, it's at a community level. And for the greater West Bloomfield area, it's at the West Bloomfield Library. And that you can bring your absentee ballot to an early voting site or your precinct on election day and put it through the tabulator yourself. I still get asked, how do I know that my ballot was counted? And, if you have concerns that, especially in August primaries, we see more spoiled ballots than any other election because you can only vote for one party's candidates. If you cross over, you've spoiled the entire partisan section of your ballot. So putting your ballot in a tabulator, whether, again, on election day or during early voting, you get that confirmation that your ballot has been tabulated because you did it yourself. So it's a great newer way to vote in Michigan. Not new in the United States. Other states have been doing it for years and years and years, but we finally have it here. And I just think it's a great option. I'm now hooked on early voting. I love it. It's great. I'm out running errands on the weekend. I run into the library and go vote and check that off my to-do list. So, and I want people to know that with the canvas that I talked about, this is open to the public. Anyone can come and observe. Our elections are so transparent. There's so many steps that people can come and observe all the steps that we take, the checks and balances that we have to ensure that our elections are accurate, secure, and fair, our public accuracy tests, the canvas. We'll be doing audits of the election results afterwards. There's just so many things that we do to make sure our results are correct and everything was done correctly, but also that there's so many ways for people to either participate, either by working or to just come observe, like I said, with the canvas or any other of the steps.
And we have so many of our local clerks too, whether it's Rhonda McClellan in Orchard Lake, Denise Dryden in Sylvan Lake, Tammy Neeb in Keiko Harbor, and Debbie Binder in West Bloomfield, always willing to answer those questions and give that information out to the residents of those local communities here in Greater West Bloomfield, as are you and your team over at the Oakland County Clerk's Office. Lisa, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Always nice to have the Oakland County Clerk and Register of Deeds on, especially when we're reflecting on our elections or preparing for those in the future. Now I know a little bit more about what goes on after election night when those votes are counted and you see the unofficial results, how they become official, and how little things like what happened in Sylvan Lake with the write-in votes that ultimately decided by less than 15 votes the fifth and final member of the Sylvan Lake City Council, how all of that is resolved. If you're just tuning in, that will be available on demand, civiccentertv.com, as well as on our YouTube and Facebook pages. We'll take a break on the Splash Live. On the other side, with hunting season underway, we're seeing a little bit more of those animal friends of ours, maybe in our backyards. Why is that the case? How can you help them out while keeping yourself and these animals safe right here in Greater West Bloomfield? That's coming up live, local, social. It's the Splash Live on Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM.
We'll be right back with the Splash Live. Find local municipal meetings at our program schedule on civiccentertv.com. Find when your meetings air live or when they're replaying on our Civic Center TV live stream. Find it all at civiccentertv.com and click schedule at the top of the screen.
Hi, I'm Chris Fry, Park Superintendent, West Bloomfield Parks. Congratulations, Civic Center TV, on 1 million views on YouTube. Thank you for all you do in the community, and thank you for having me on The Splash throughout the season to talk about activities out in the parks. Chris Fry, proud to be 1 in a million.
I'm an ex-drug dealer, and I'll be your sub today. Two milligrams of fentanyl can be lethal. A lethal dose is in here. who gets it, I won't know.
It's cheap, it's potent, and it's profitable.
The sad reality is fentanyl is being mixed into everything now.
More kids should know.
Bringing you stories and memories from West Bloomfield. Civic Center TV, television that's close to home. And now, back to The Splash, live.
Live, local, social, it's The Splash Live on Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM. I'm Tyler Keefe, thanking you for joining us today and always keeping up to date with us on CivicCenterTV.com. While you're at it, click those links on our homepage to all of our social media. You can follow us on Facebook at Civic Center TV 15, as well as on Instagram, X, and YouTube at Civic Center TV. Hunting season in Michigan is underway, and while this beloved pastime usually is undertaken in the Upper Peninsula or the Lower Peninsula as well, close to home in Greater West Bloomfield, we're seeing some of those key animals like deer a little bit more often in our backyard. Here for more insight on why that may be the case and what you can do to protect this wildlife and yourself is Jared Duquette from the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, or DNR. Jared, thank you for being with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, glad to have you on with us to talk about this because for many people, they love seeing the deer in their backyard. It's a beautiful reflection of our local native life. But also on the other side of that, there are many people that are maybe concerned about having that much wildlife in their yards for their pets, for their kids, etc. So let's begin with the basics. Why do you believe, or the DNR believe maybe, that these animals are being seen maybe a bit more commonly in domestic areas like Greater West Bloomfield?
Sure, there's several factors involved with that, especially for species like deer, that they're very adaptable to people. And a lot of times, and so as we see more development, more subdivisions and things going in that kind of create these little refugia for deer where they normally would be hunted, but now they can't be without ordinance changes. And a lot of people, they're planting great food out there for deer. We hear lots of complaints of, my hostas are being eaten and things, and that's great deer food out there. And so, they have the shelter that they need, they have the food that they need, and they're in a safe place. And so they're allowed to thrive. And we just don't have as many hunters nowadays too across the state to help manage deer. And so a species like deer is doing extremely well.
And so when that is the case, and you mentioned there that a lot of people will enjoy putting food out for these deer, or in this case, they unintentionally do so with the last remnants of those spring and summer gardens. If people are trying to be helpful to these deer and leaving food out, what challenges might that face for the animals themselves and to maybe address this as it becomes in some cases an issue in our communities?
Yeah, there's two big ones when, with kind of any animals out there, that if we're providing food that they normally wouldn't get in the environment, that often will cluster animals in really high abundances, and you risk actually more spread of diseases that kind of naturally occur in the environment because you have all those animals coming in contact in that location. But also it provides more food than they would normally get. And so these populations, they have more fawns if you're a deer, you have more, chicks if you're a bird, that kind of thing. And so it provides all that nutrition that those populations need to really flourish.
Jared Duquette is with us, Human-Wildlife Interaction Specialist with the Michigan DNR, on today's edition of The Splash Live, as we see a lot more of this natural wildlife in our area interacting with us in our neighborhoods. They're in the woods behind our homes here with so many wetlands and woodlands in Greater West Bloomfield, and especially deer as we're in the deer hunting season through the end of November. Jared, as we look at these animals that are coming through our yards, coming through our neighborhoods and crossing our streets, and that brings up that there are a number of different hazards that they also bring along with them. Of course, on our roads, we have deer going across. It's an obvious hazard there, but what others may they bring forth when they're in our neighborhoods?
Sure. And, what you see, and, you bring up a good point with, we see more and more vehicle collisions with deer. And certainly agencies like MDOT are very concerned with that, amongst others. And, we're very concerned with that too. But, beyond that, we see, there's a lot of these overabundant populations, especially with deer. They're causing a lot of damage to people's ornamental plants, trees, flowers, shrubs, that kind of thing. And beyond that, it's the deer themselves. People often forget that too. Populations can get so big, they actually start to starve over time, or they start to do worse because they start to get themselves out of house and home, or introduce more disease into populations. And so, as the wildlife management agency here in the state, we get very concerned about that when we start to see that all that food and that risk being incurred in some areas.
So then how is that reflected? How is that addressed both from the municipal level locally here in Greater West Bloomfield, and then in collaboration at the county level or with your organization at the state level at the DNR?
Sure, absolutely. And we take a very integrated approach. Of course, traditionally we've relied on, with deer anyway, with, deer hunters, for example. And so that's one management tool we can use to help kind of manage deer populations. But beyond that, we work very closely with a lot of municipalities across the state, including in Southeast Michigan, and to help them create management plans that are specifically tailored to that community, their needs, their type of zoning ordinances and things, and look at solutions that may be best for them. And so we try to work very collaboratively with municipalities.
And in terms of those individual homeowners here in Greater West Bloomfield, what can they maybe do to keep this wildlife protected and safe, but also discourage them maybe from being in their yards, on their properties, in our neighborhoods, and back in the more natural areas where they're best fit?
Absolutely. And so, you have species like deer, and we get more turkey complaints actually nowadays, and things, and Canada geese. And so, animals readily habituate people, especially if they're being fed. And so, we really discourage and help municipalities hopefully, have ordinances where we don't want people feeding animals, because they'll readily habituate. And then, we end up with, instances where we have deer running around with Halloween buckets on their heads and things. And it's bad for people because deer are coming in closer contact with, their plants and things. But it's also bad for the deer potentially, or bad for the turkeys. And so, we're trying to create that balance. So please don't feed the animals. There is enough food out there for them to survive and do well. The other thing too is, be proactive in working with your municipality, or doing things around your home, like protecting your plants, or planting native plants, which tend to be more deer resistant than maybe some you would get from, say, a nursery, for example.
Yes, and this season we have so many animals that we'll see around our yards as we're observing with our families during the holidays. Great to observe them, a beautiful piece of our nature. But we want to pardon the turkeys, as we do each and every year with the governor, a West Bloomfield resident naming those last year, and let them go to the library, as you're seeing on your screen, and do some reading over at the West Bloomfield Main Library branch, a place they love very much, with the woods right behind there, both the turkeys and the deer. Jared Duquette is with us, Human-Wildlife Interaction Specialist with the Michigan DNR, on today's edition of the Splash Live. Jared, before we let you go, any lasting messages for our local residents here in Greater West Bloomfield about how they can best interact and support this native wildlife that's roaming around our community?
Yeah, I think that the main message I always like to tell people is, help us keep the wild in wildlife. However that is, if, not feeding them, we don't want them to become habituated. And especially, during fall time when deer are in their breeding period, slow down, keep your eyes peeled. Those deer are very active this time of year. And as we get into late winter, we have species like coyotes that start to breed, and you're going to hear them howling more and things. They're around, but they're doing a good job of helping control the rodent populations and things that can cause damage too. So just try to live with wildlife the best you can.
Well, Jared, we appreciate your time joining us on today's edition of the program, and your insight as we see more of this wildlife interacting with our community each and every day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Jared Duquette from the Michigan Department of Natural Resources joining us today on the Splash Live. If you're just tuning in, that'll be available for you, as all of our programming is on demand on civiccentertv.com, as well as on our social media, Facebook at Civic Center TV 15, as well as YouTube, Instagram, and X at Civic Center TV. In Orchard Lake, a special anniversary continues throughout 2024 as they celebrate as a community and an organization here in the Tri-Cities. I had a chance to go out to join in on this celebration and get a little bit more insight into what makes this such a special and persistent community right here in Greater West Bloomfield. This is Orchard Lake Community Church Presbyterian, a church with deep ties for many families in Greater West Bloomfield. Dr. Catherine Kanganey's great-great-great-grandparents, Caroline and Colin Campbell, founded the church in 1874. 150 years later, she says her ancestors would be overjoyed at what this community has become.
Well, although it was the Campbells' idea to found the church, it was a community project from the very beginning. And when the church was founded in 1874, it was a seasonal church. So I think they would be floored to see not only the community having grown and having sustained the church for the summers, but now that it's a year-round, very active congregation, I think they would be floored.
For Patty Rothley and Becky Sasick, their connections to the church span 4 generations and play a special role in their family.
Very special and unusual, I think, to have that many generations worship here.
And now her children are all coming here, and it's just been a wonderful experience.
The church, like any community, is about connection, providing a place to be together and build bonds that strengthen our community during the challenges of life.
I think this church came to be because the community pulled together, and there have been times of challenge for this congregation, and it has pulled together to meet and solve those challenges. And so I think that's the legacy from 1874 to now.
I truly believe that what we've founded for 150 years would be the best legacy possible, that we are serving our neighbors, our friends, loved ones, and strangers in love, sharing with them as we are able the good news of Jesus Christ that we believe here at the Orchard Lake Church, and supporting them through tough times.
Ultimately, it's joy that brings the people of Orchard Lake Community Church together, a friendly family of folks from across Greater West Bloomfield and beyond.
You make friends when you come here because everyone is so wonderful, and you serve on committees together, and you do things together, and then you just feel like this is your home.
Everybody in the church always works together as a team. We support so many different charities and anything you might want to be involved in.
I think the lessons of the church are that we want to love each other and support each other through the tough times and the good times.
It was a labor of love for an awful lot of people, and this congregation and this community ought to feel really proud of that legacy.
It's a legacy that was no accident, sown through generations of an emphasis on helping each other and helping other people.
Many communities of faith do as we do, but I wanted to emphasize today all that we have accomplished together and the previous generations have accomplished and bequeathed to us. What a beautiful heritage we have here of people who have served locally and then have gone nationally to serve in many different ways through the Presbyterian Church, but not only through our denomination, but other charitable groups, and internationally.
The friendliness and the feeling of community and the service in this church is amazing.
I think there's a lot of people that belong to this church that are very committed to keeping things going. And it's a very welcoming community, so it's not like we're, isolated. We love when new people come to the church, and there's always some way to get involved.
If you believe in something that much, you can will it to happen. And this group of people from 1874 to the present that have put their pennies together and put their talents together, that you can achieve what you set out to do if you've got a group of people who believes in it and works together to get it done. I hope my great-great-great-grandchildren will be here in 150 years to keep celebrating.
Hey, we can't wait to be back out there for the 300th anniversary of Orchard Lake Community Church Presbyterian in the near future. In the meantime, you can join in on their celebration on olccp.com or Facebook at olccp. Big weekend is ahead on the gridiron, but this time over at West Bloomfield High School, the team playing football is not going to be the Lakers, but rather another team very familiar to us close to home, Orchard Lake St. Mary's in the Division II state semifinals on Saturday, 1 p.m. kickoff against Birmingham Groves, the undefeated Falcons who beat the Lakers 28-13 back in week number 2. The winner of that game goes to Ford Field on Thanksgiving weekend, where they will face either Byron Center or East Lansing for the trophy that means the most to football teams in the MHSAA. So we'll be rooting on the Eaglets this weekend. You have a chance to do that at 1 p.m. Saturday at West Bloomfield High School, and hopefully see them go to a state championship after their basketball team on the boys' side brought home the hardware earlier on this year. That's going to do it for our program today. We are out of time, but in the meantime, if you want to see more of the Splash Live, all you got to do is head over to civiccentertv.com or follow us across our social media. Big thank you to our entire team, Jake Schaff out in the field and Calvin Brown back at Master Control. For all of us at Civic Center TV, I'm Tyler Kieft. Thank you for tuning in to the Splash Live.